It's time for the next installment of the Crazy Dad Lotus here. We're going to start shooting another episode. And yeah, I'm inside as you can see, because right now it's cold outside in my shop. It's the middle of winter here, and my shop's not insulated very well and hard to heat, and so I thought, you know what, I'm ready to start putting the body together anyway. So what I'm going to do is bring all these sub-assemblies into the house here and clean them up and get them put back together. And so this is going to be my project for the next few days in my spare time. This is the dashboard out of the Lotus, and this whole car, especially the interior parts, are ultra simplistic. So what we've got here is just a simple piece of plywood that's got a nice veneer on it, and then it's just had some clear coat put on it, and as you can see, it's got some labels on some of the positions where the switches and lights and things like that go. And I don't know if this is going to show up real well. You can see it there. We've got some problems with the finish delaminating on this thing, but I've made an executive decision here. Get it in the right light where you can see it a little bit better. Remember, this car's not going to be a full-blown restoration, and so I am going to leave this as is, because that is original patina on this thing, and that seems to be something that is, if not popular, at least wouldn't scare somebody off if I went to sell this car to them. And as far as I'm concerned, it's not going to affect the performance. And although I am a carpenter and a woodworker by trade, I really don't want to get into stripping this down and try to refinish it, because I'm afraid that the wood is not in good enough shape to actually do that. I've seen some right here. This wood is actually delaminating under here, and the veneer is curling off of it, as well as I don't want to mess with trying to find the lettering to put back in place there. So this is going to work out just fine for the nature of the restoration of this car. And when we get it back together, it's going to be perfectly drivable and fun. And you know, here's another piece. So this piece is, you can see there's actually a chip that's come completely off, and we've got some lighter colored wood showing through in a couple of places. But I noticed that the previous owner had made up this surround for the radio that drops in there, and it actually mostly covers the big one over here. This one isn't really going to show, but I'll take some dark brown stain and put in there to hide that. And then we'll be back in business, and won't need to worry about how that really looks. So my goal today is I'm going to start cleaning up all these parts and pieces. There's a lot of dust on them, and I'm just going to do that and start kind of evaluating what I've got, start piecing it back together, and make sure I can get all the parts put back where they need to be. And we'll see what happens, see if I've got to buy anything for it, or if we can make do with what we've got. So down here, can't see real great, but on the left we've got a speedometer, on the right we have a tack. They will go into this housing right here, and I don't know what the lights are. One of those is probably going to be our high beam light, and I suspect, judging by looking here, I don't see two turn signals, so I'll bet one of these is just a turn signal flashing light that won't tell you direction. The other one, I'm not sure. That red one is probably a warning light of some kind, maybe an oil pressure light or something like that, or who knows, stoplight, flasher, who knows. We'll find out. Here I've got what appears to be a light switch. I think, no, it's windshield wipers according to the picture in the end of the handle there. I've got two little interior lights. I don't know where they go. Here is a rocker switch that says lamps, so it must go in that hole right there. Here's another one that says hazard. So there's the hole for the hazard light. Oh, hazard goes right here. So we'll put it in there. This one says fan, must mount into there. So there's our 3 switches. Yeah, my 4 smaller gauges. I have an oil gauge, an amp gauge, a temp gauge, and a fuel gauge, and they will mount along the top in these 4 holes here. That says brake fail. That must mean that there's a warning light that goes in there, but I haven't seen it anywhere. So we'll mess around and see what we come up with. I've got my right there, my heating and cooling vents. One goes in each end, right there and there. We have a couple of brackets that I have no idea where they go, and a bunch of hardware. So we should be in pretty good shape here to put this thing back together. So I'm going to start cleaning it up, and probably will show you as I get a few individual pieces put back in, maybe actually, you know, set the camera on the tripod and show you how to reassemble some of this. I don't know. We will see as we roll along. But there we go. Moving forward on the Crazy Dad Lotus. Alright, here's a little update on where we're at. I took a wet cloth and washed this thing down really good, and it cleaned a lot of grime off of it. And I did front, back, and inside all of the holes and everything, just so I could clean it up where it needed to be. Now, just an FYI, and it should be obvious, but not everybody sees things the same way. This is a piece of wood, and wood, when it gets hit with water, it swells and it does all kinds of strange things. So you want to keep the water to a minimum here, and especially you don't want to leave anything standing on it. Now, fortunately, this thing, this is a good seal here. It's sealed inside all the holes and on the edges, and the back's kind of sealed, and so I just was careful not to overdo it with the water, and that's something that you want to be aware of. Then what I'm working on here with the clamps is some of those places where the finish is delaminating from the plywood in the background. Especially in some areas like this around the glove box where I'm kind of concerned because I don't want to catch it and rip it off of there. I've stuck some wood glue down in there, and I got it clamped now with those clamps. These two here are actually repairing some areas on the back. There was a really big chip coming out of here, so I pulled it back, stuck some glue down behind it. I've got it drying. This down here was a much smaller one, and that's kind of moving along there. I've got one more area here along this top of the instrument cluster. Let's see if yeah, I doubt if you can see it very good, but that piece is almost completely loose all the way along there. So I am going to glue it and clamp it when I get all of these clamps freed up, so that I can clamp it all the way along there and kind of pull that back down. And let's see, I took a little bit of darker brown wood stain and stained these spots where I was going to have a little bit showing up there, and they're not perfect. I may even possibly try to find a brown Sharpie, a permanent marker, and go in there and darken those up even more. But I don't want to do a whole lot more than that because I don't want to, you know, I'm not after perfection here, I'm after functionality. So there we go, that's kind of where we're at now. I'll be back as that glue dries, and I will have done this over here, and it will have dried too. Get all the clamps off of it, and right now I'm going to start in and clean up a bunch of the pieces that go into it. Probably clean up this and the air vents and, you know, the gauges and things so that they're ready to put back in it, and then we'll come back and show you where we're at. We've got a little bit of stuff done. I've got these 4 small central gauges put back in place, and then I'm working on this right here. So this is the main tachometer speedometer housing that actually, when it's all put together, it goes on the back of the dash like this and holds, some screws hold that in place. And this thing here, the housing itself, and most of the interior panels on this car sorry, I'm in the kids' bedroom here working on this because they're gone, is made out of this really thin ABS plastic, because ABS can be vacuum formed to the shapes that you want it. And I've worked with the 1/8-inch thick stuff before, and it actually works really good, turns out to be really strong. But this stuff started out less than a 1/16 of an inch thick, I think. And so these parts, while they are extremely lightweight, especially now that that car is 50 years old, they're getting brittle and have to be handled really delicately. And so this one's a good example of that. When Dan and Eric tore this thing apart, obviously they were worried about the structural integrity of this thing, because those two gauges sitting on there are going to be a pound and a half of weight that are bouncing up and down on that thing all the time. So they had gone in there and fabricated this aluminum backing plate that will actually really strengthen that thing a lot. So I've kind of cleaned it up with some sandpaper and put it back together and got it in there. So this is a tachometer. I've got it in place. We've got those 3 central lights in place, indicator lights, and I found something on the tachometer and the speedometer both, and I'm hoping that we can see it here in the light. It's very difficult to see, but you see the frostiness? There we go, by the numbers 30 and 50 and 70. That is inside of the lens there, and I can't wash it or wipe it off. So I was going to demonstrate to you how to take these things apart, and normally what you do is you can flip them over on the back, and these little tabs that you see right here, let's see, get the camera to focus on that. Yeah, right there. Normally you get a screwdriver under those and carefully straighten them up, and then that chrome bezel will pull straight off of the front of the gauge, and it allows you very easily to take the bezel and the glass and whatever else is in there off, so that you can do whatever cleaning that you want. But this one actually is designed to untwist until it gets to those tangs get into notches, and then this assembly right here pulls off. And so in this, you've got the chrome bezel, you've got that black frame background that goes around, so it kind of covers everything, but yet lets the backlight shine through it. Then you've got the glass, and there's a rubber gasket in there to help hold everything steady and tight. And so what happens anyway, I'm sure we can't see it here, but that, yeah, I can kind of barely see it. There we go. That foggy stuff right there is actually just some old flakes of white paint. So there you can see I wiped it and it came clean in that spot. And what's happening is the white paint on the inside of the housing here breaks down, and it has fallen up in there and gotten on things. So anyway, I'm going to blow this out. And I would say you can use compressed air there if you're really careful and hold it back and don't put a lot of pressure on it. But that gets the bulk of those loose pieces out of there from doing that. And then I can come in here and clean the rest of the glass off. And I'm going to do that off camera and then reassemble the thing just in the opposite way. And then we drop it into our hole in the cluster over there. Slip these 2 clamp pieces over the studs on the back of the gauge, like so, and then we put those nuts on them right there, and that clamps that thing down and pinches it into the dash so that it won't come out. So that's where we're going to go next, and I just want to show you that little thing because not everybody knows how gauges come apart, and they're really not that hard to do. If you had to go deeper, you could actually pull these 2 screws out here, and most of the time this one will be a little different because of how this is hooked up. but most of the time that will let the instrument come out of the casing itself if you need to get in there and work on it. So there you go. Everything's pretty standard so far. I have my manual down here that I got my right diagram of which gauges go in the right place, so that's helping a lot. And we're off and moving, so we will be back. Alright, we made some pretty good progress here so far. Got things cleaned up, the vents are put back in, most of the switches that I have are back in, gauges, these gauges and that vent are back in. So, and this went together pretty nice. On the back of it, it just screws into the back of the wooden dashboard right there. And I made the mistake of getting all those little tiny screws in before I realized that I had a bunch of washers in that pile. So I had to take them all back out and put those back in, and now we're ready to move on. Getting this laid down here. I thought I was missing the glove box, the box that goes in there, and I assumed that it was a plastic one, just like the speedometer housing over there. And just now I went out to my shop in the pile of parts, and voila, this thing actually has an old standard cardboard type glove box in it, and it's in pretty good shape. So I'm gonna clean it up and get it put back in there. And then in the center where the radio stereo goes, this car originally came with an 8-track player, and I actually have it, and supposedly it's in good working order. And so, for nostalgia's sake, I'm going to clean this 8-track player back or up and put it back in there. Be kind of fun. I've seen at some of the thrift stores, they'll have a few 8-track tapes for sale, and the funny thing is most of them are the stuff that I liked to listen to when I was a kid, so we'll probably pick up a few of those for 50 cents a piece and keep them in the car in case I want to listen to music. And, you know, today most of us are listening with Bluetooth and headphones and that sort of stuff, so it's really not going to make a difference, but it's going to, you know, be another semi-original touch to the car. And you don't see 8-track players anymore, probably for good reason. But anyway, that's the direction I'm going to go next. As you can see, my pile of parts is narrowing down a lot here. There's some of these things that I still haven't discovered where they go, the brackets and these little things like this and stuff. These lights, I still haven't discovered where they go. And I've got to go dig out the ignition switch. I think I know where it is. And whatever goes in this hazard light hole here and that brake fail light hole, I have not seen those. So I'm going to look through the boxes with the wiring harness in it, because I'm pretty sure that's where my ignition switch is, and see if those things happen to be in there. But once I get those together, that's pretty well going to wrap up the assembly. So I'll have this thing as a unit that I can then set into the spot in the body where it goes as soon as I get the body ready for it. And I will have made some good use of cold winter's day, so I didn't have to be out in my shop. Alrighty then, we've got most of her done. I got my 8-track player put in, although on the back of it I've got to make some brackets, I think, to actually hold it in place against the face of the dash there. I did find my two little lights here that I needed. Interestingly enough, I didn't find my ignition switch, and I think I've seen it, so I'll have to look a little bit deeper. But at this point I'm going to set this assembly aside because it's ready to go into the car. I can always get that ignition switch in there later, but I'll keep, you know, putting pieces together, and probably it's going to show up somewhere. I have no idea which box it's in, but it'll probably show up somewhere. If it doesn't, we'll solve the problem. But anyway, that assembly is together, and it's going to be acceptable for the type of restoration that we're doing here, so I'm going to be happy with it. So there we go. That's a wrap up on putting the dash together on the Crazy Dad Lotus. And we will see you back in the next episode.